All right, welcome to Observe This with my friend Oliver Copp. We're going to talk about the All Out show this weekend, which I will be in attendance. We're going to cover that show. We'll preview it, but I also want to ask Oliver some questions about the pro wrestling industry of today as we are. The first thing, I guess, though, is you are working on the German broadcast for AEW Rampage, which means you got to see and you got to call the terrific CM Punk comeback to professional wrestling. Tell me about it.
It was amazing. It was seriously the person I called it with, my broadcast partner and friend Mike. We used to do ECW together 25 years ago, and we both said it was the most fundamental thing, the biggest thing we'd ever done in our broadcast careers, and that does cover some ground considering he did WCW and after that TNA and Lucha Underground, and basically between the two of us and the third broadcaster on AEW, we did every major promotion in the past 25 years. So it does cover a lot of ground.
By the way, people who are watching this live, they saw me go from the Fight Game Media background to the Observe This background. All I can say is live video. That's my excuse. Okay, so going back to that moment, when you think back to even things, working for the UFC, other things where you've done, where you've broadcasted, but as well as a fan, like compare that moment to things that you've done or things that you've seen in the past.
I'm going to say three things. One in WWE, and that was WrestleMania 20, when Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero basically ended the show in the middle of the ring together as dual champions, arm in arm, hugging. That was on that level. And in the UFC when Randy Couture beat Tim Sylvia. And the other one when Brock Lesnar came back and beat up Frank Mir at UFC 100 and did the Coors. I'm going to get to go drink a Coors because Bud isn't paying me anything. So those moments were like etched in my brain. And the CM Punk moment probably, if I had been in the arena, which I was for all the other ones, if I had been in the arena at Rampage, it would probably have eclipsed it because I've never heard such a loud and pronounced reaction. What about you?
So it's so funny that you mentioned that because all of those moments like bring back crazy memories for me. And unfortunately, the Benoit and Guerrero one has been, I think we can look back fondly on that moment, but just so many things after that moment, like really maybe make you think of, negative thoughts. So the Randy Couture moment, I'll tell you how I watched this. I was when this was when my kids were really small. Now they're in college and one's actually graduated. So I was doing a lot of coaching and doing stuff. And I forgot I had watched most of the show that morning. I couldn't watch it live for whatever reason. So I'm watching the show. We have like a game or something, and so I get up to Randy versus Sylvia, and I have to stop it. And we have to go to the game. I had a buddy who was coaching with me. He runs he actually fought for Strikeforce. He had like 3 or 4 fights in Strikeforce. His name was Anthony Figueroa, a little guy. We were coaching together, and he's like, "Did you watch last night?" I was like, "No, don't tell me because I only have this last fight left." And he just smiled, and I was like, "Shh." Now I know what happened. Well, I didn't know what happened, but good things because I wanted Randy to win. But that is such a great memory. For me, on a pro wrestling level, the only thing that I can think of is when I saw live Jericho and Benoit against Austin and Triple H on Monday Night Raw, because that was in my hometown. That title change, that pop was pretty ridiculous. I don't think it was at this level, though. For a local event, Strikeforce, Frank Shamrock, who was Frank fighting? It was one of the very first Strikeforce shows. I forget who he was fighting.
Probably Kung Lee.
Well, no, it was even before that one. Whatever it was, I think there was a Gracie fight, and then he fought someone else, and then there was the Kung Lee. It was the guy he fought in the middle that I can't remember. But Frank with that crowd, he knew he does the thing where he's like saying, "I'm going to put him to sleep," and the crowd goes nuts. Like Frank Shamrock knew how to. Just as good as anybody, how to have that crowd in the middle of the palm of his hand.
He was one of the greats for sure. And his brother as well. Like, he's still going.
Yeah, crazy.
Brother.
Yeah, brother. By the way, did you read the Ken book?
I did. It was awesome.
Yeah,
Jonathan Snowden
really
writes
great.
some of the best books. Like,
Really
I
great
love that
book.
guy to death.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the pro wrestling industry as it is today. We saw the return of CM Punk. He swore he wasn't coming back to wrestling. Um, there's a possibility of Brian Danielson. I'm going to have to get back used to Brian Danielson. Switching over to AEW. We've heard that rumor for probably over a month now. There's Bray Wyatt talk. I would say even as far back as 3 years, this wasn't happening. And there was some of this with TNA Impact when they were trying to bring over the older WWE stars. But because of the way that they promoted wrestling, like people thought like, oh, this is interesting, but I'm not sure if they could ever get to this level where AEW has gotten only in 2 years. Does it remind you of back when we were younger and wrestling was hot with the changing of the talent and who knows who shows up where and when? And Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are on WCW one day, and that whole thing. Like, does it remind you of that time?
In a way, it does, but it's better because I know it's going to be more substantial because the people who run ECW actually care about wrestling and put a lot of thought into the programs they do and who they bring in and for what reason they bring them in. I mean, I know that CM Punk wouldn't have come back for anybody else and for any other reason. But he was very impressed with what they did with the Brody Lee tribute and basically with his illness never getting out, with everybody being tight-lipped and nobody really feeding anything to the press. So I think it's a perfect storm right now. We live in exciting times. And my beginning in wrestling was 82, 83, so back in the world-class days. And I want to say that a lot of stuff I see on AEW these days reminds me in the best possible way of what happened with the Freebirds and the Von Erichs, where people just get so passionate that even rational adults who know this is pro wrestling get really angry when things don't go the way they want to.
Yeah.
Like, just as an example, when Hangman lost in that 5 versus 5 elimination match, Tony Khan wanted people to be shocked. I was shocked, but I was also angry because I wanted this to happen so badly. It had been built up so well, and then basically the rug got pulled out from under us.
Yeah.
And now it looks like it all worked out for the best at the moment.
Sure.
So
100%.
we live in exciting times, brother, and we're only at the beginning right now.
Okay, so here's a question that has been thrown out there more recently, and it's kind of been the question on my mind, which is Tony Khan is he's a giant pro wrestling fan, but in this role, he's still fairly new. But he's worked in other sports organizations, so I'm sure he's seen structure and how everything works. So that probably gives him a leg up on something like this. But with all the new talent coming in, now when you're a startup, when you're a very brand new company, you're like, come with us. The message is like, we're the little engine that could, we're going to, leave an imprint on this industry. Like WWE is like the big, bad, evil company, and we're going to come in here and we're going to really please wrestling fans. And they did. Now you have talent from WWE who are interested now because AEW is growing and growing, and it's become a really cool place to be. It's become a great place to work, according to a lot of their talent. But now Tony has a different job, I guess, which is he's still got his AEW Day One folks, but now he's got some really heavy hitters whose characters are over, who people want to see in big time matches, and mixing that talent together. And really, he has 3 hours of TV, but it still doesn't seem enough. Like, do you have faith that he's going to be able to sustain those possible choppy waters of people may be upset that they're not getting pushed how they thought they were going to get pushed because they're kind of getting pushed down in the pecking order?
Well, the thing is, when you don't do 50-50 booking all the time, you're going to have people who win, you're going to have people who lose. And there are probably going to be folks at some point that kind of grow frustrated with their role in AEW because they thought they were going to be here, but they're only here. But what I personally think is because Tony does cycle people in and out of the program and doesn't have the same people on TV every week, I think he's going to find a way to make this work. but I do expect some people to perhaps get pissed off a little bit and
Yeah,
perhaps get disappointed and perhaps even decide not to stick around. But that's a normal process. Like you can't keep growing without trimming the fat at some point.
100%.
And some people get over better than others. Some people, that's one thing I really love about AEW is everybody seems to fit in the locker room. There aren't any people who kind of cause drama. Well, Evilise maybe, but she's a goner. And that atmosphere is I have never experienced anything like that in pro wrestling before. So that's something I think that Tony's going to want to try and keep going. But again, I'm not Tony Khan. I don't know how he does things. But as a fan, as somebody who works as a broadcaster in the industry, I couldn't be happy with how things are going. And I really hope that the people coming in, I mean, nobody but Punk has been confirmed, but a lot of folks have been teased that they fit in and that it doesn't lead to some of the young stars that AEW already built kind of getting pushed down from Jungle Boy to Darby to Hangman Adam Page. Those would be my
Guevara,
big
Sammy
three.
Guevara.
Sammy. But I have faith that they're going to pull it off. And let's be honest, you're going to need somebody to work with a Daniel Bryan. You're going to need somebody to work with a CM Punk. And what they're doing with Darby and Punk is really encouraging, in my opinion.
And CM Punk's message was that he wanted to work with these young guys. He wanted to be that kind of vet. I've met Daniel Bryan maybe once or twice, so I don't know him, but he seems like he'd be very interested in helping the current wrestling business because he loves it so much in that way, working with younger talent. I guess my wonder is, one of the things, we go back to WCW, bringing over Hogan, the ultimate shark. That was going to be his company no matter what. Hall and Nash, sharks. They were not interested in the success as much of WCW as their careers, which completely fine for them. Like they're independent contractor pro wrestlers. Do you sense that the tide of that has changed? Like, not saying that there are no sharks. We just saw Brock Lesnar come back, but those type of guys, and that's not a shot at Brock either. I consider Brock to be the smartest man in professional wrestling today, man or woman. But there's not as many Brock Lesnars, it seems, today. And some of that is Vince McMahon kind of leveraging out some of the stars. But does that make AEW's job in this situation better in that you have guys who seem to be willing to utilize their star power to help grow this company?
It's a different generation, I think. Like when Hall and Nash were the big stars and Hogan, they came from a time period where they were basically working in on the independents for most of their career in different promotions before they hit it big in WWE. And I feel that the wrestlers today, they came up in a different time where people were working together more than they were trying to backstab each other. And I think that accounts for a lot of the good vibes that people are getting both in AEW and in NXT as well. Like when WWE doesn't do anything stupid with the roster, people in NXT are actually pretty happy. Yeah. So I believe that it's a more of a collaborative effort these days than something that's combative, for better or worse. There are some aspects, obviously, where you feel like that wrestlers are working together more than against each other. Like it looks too much like a collaboration sometimes in the ring, which
Sure.
it didn't really back in the day because you could tell that everybody was trying to protect their spots and look
Sure.
good. But I feel that it's a more positive atmosphere. It's a more modern atmosphere. And I think somebody like a Scott Hall or a Kevin Nash or a Hulk Hogan would stick out like a sore thumb in AEW, for instance. And I don't think they would belong for this world.
We have a question from one of our buddies, Daza. Question for Oliver: when you did the German commentary for WWF and WCW, did they pay attention to the things you said on commentary, and did they have input?
So I never did commentary for the WWF. The only thing I did for those guys was I ran WWE Magazine over here for 2 years. But for WCW, we had complete autonomy, both in the first broadcast and the live broadcast, as well as anything else we wanted to do afterwards. We were allowed to just put the programs, chop them up and put them back together in a way that we choose, in a way that fits the market, because let's be honest, some things were just dumb. Like on Nitro, on Thunder. And the colleagues who did the first run, they basically tried to work around that by having intra commentary feuds and just distracting people from bullshit that was going on. And it worked really well because WCW reruns, like a year, 2 years after they aired, still outdrew WWE first run programming back then in Germany.
Wow.
So Germany was always very much a WCW type of deal. But to answer Daz's question, I know from the people who were working WWF that they had quite strict supervision. So they were told exactly what to say and what not to say, and there were word lists that were banned. There were things that they were not allowed to do, and mostly they weren't allowed to edit the tapes in any way, shape, or form. So what arrived on tape had to air. That was it.
Wow. It kind of reminds me of, I think Conan said when he was doing the Spanish broadcasting for Impact, he said he could say whatever the heck he wanted. No one listened.
Dude, Conan always says whatever the heck he wants. My very first live broadcast, I worked WCW Millennium Final, a pay-per-view that took place in Germany. I was in charge of the backstage channel, where we basically had two television channels. One was in arena, one was backstage, and I interviewed people on the backstage channel. And on WCW TV, on a live pay-per-view, Conan was like, well, I would like to go to the WWF and become a star. And I saw Johnny Ace was standing behind the camera, and he was like, I was actually just joking about that with Conan a couple of days ago because it was so surreal. Like, what I loved about Conan is he never pulled a punch.
Yeah.
He always said what was on his mind, and it made for compelling television, even though it didn't always make officials happy.
So one of the first times I went to Dave Meltzer's house to watch wrestling, this would have probably been like 13 or 14, 2013, 2014. We're watching the show. It was some random WWE pay-per-view. And me and my buddy John LaRocca were just kind of hanging out. We're the only two people there. And all of a sudden, the voicemail, Dave still has a landline. He still has like the voice, the phone and the voicemail connected together. And so all of a sudden we hear a familiar voice on the voicemail, and it was Conan. And he's leaving this long message for Dave. I don't even remember what it was, but I kind of looked at John and he kind of looked at me, and we're like, oh yeah, like this is normal for Dave, but not normal for us to be watching wrestling show. And then all of a sudden you hear Conan's voice in the background, which was pretty kind of surreal. But then the one opportunity I would have had to meet him, he came to the Bay Area for something. I think he was, honestly, I think it may have had to do something with Jeff Cobb. Like they were scouting guys for Lucha Underground or something like that. And I remember Jeff Cobb being involved. And Dave told me after the fact that Conan came over to watch the Canelo fight or whatever the boxing match was. And I was like, bummer. Like, I wish I would have been there. I would have loved to watch boxing with Conan. That would have been fun.
Conan's a great guy. Like, he's really funny.
Okay, so give me what's your temperature like for this all-out pay-per-view as it pertains to how you're usually interested in AEW shows? Are you at a 9 or are you at a 7? Like, where do you sit with what we know about All Out on paper? And we haven't even watched Dynamite or Rampage yet, so this is a little early. But how do you feel about this show upcoming this weekend?
Here's the thing: I'm kind of excited for almost every match on the card for different reasons. The one that kind of scares me the most is the cage match because I know Rey Fenix is going to be in it, and you just know he wants to have his big pay-per-view moment in the biggest match they've ever had in AEW.
Yep.
So I kind of expect/fear whatever he's going to do off of the cage, and he's going to do something. That one's really, really on my mind a lot. I really don't know if they're going to change the tag titles, if they're going to keep the tag titles on the Bucks and kind of go in a different direction. But if the Lucha Brothers win the titles, they'd probably be the biggest baby faces in the entire arena, with the exception of CM Punk and perhaps Darby Allen that night. So that one is one I look forward to, and also, obviously, Punk and Darby. It's a huge match.
So, is it Punk's night? Like, would you main event him, or would you sort of do what they normally do, title match on it last? Because I think Kenny Omega and Christian are going to have a great match, but there is low buzz for that match, maybe more so than any world title match in AEW's really short history. And Punk is not to say he's the one that sold the tickets, because those tickets were sold way before he was announced, but it definitely feels, being in Chicago, it feels like his weekend. And I just kind of wonder, when it comes to match placement, like, what would you do?
I would do Punk and Darby as the first match on the card. I would start off the card with those two because if you don't do that, people are going to be chanting for CM Punk all night long.
Mm-hmm.
And by having him on early, they can get it out of their system. Put Big Show or Paul White and QT Marshall after that. You know, you can construct a good audience flow. And I really don't know whether they're going to be able to lower and raise and lower the cage in the arena. So if they can't raise it, up to the roof or something, they might have to go with the cage match last.
Yeah, true.
So my gut feeling is first match is going to be Darby and Punk, and it's going to end with the tag title match, and everything else is going to be in between.
So lots of talk about, and I think back to my first ever, the show that we were at, the first AEW pay-per-view, the Double or Nothing card. John Moxley comes out in the end. Crowd is pretty much anticipating him all night. They're just kind of waiting and waiting and waiting. And when he finally comes out, roof blows off the building. And it was a great moment. It was a fantastic live wrestling moment. And so there's a wonder, will that happen on this show because of all the rumored names that we just talked about? So this question comes from Dan. Do you think there will be a big debut for All Out? There must be one. So what do you expect from the show?
I'm not sure I can answer that question really because I'm not expecting anything and I don't know anything. But my gut feeling is there's going to be one or two people coming either back or doing a big debut. For instance, I kind of feel that Anna Jay is coming back in the
that'd be great
Battle Royal. Like it would make sense, right? She's probably ready. She's been at the events again, so that's one thing I would do. And like the fan inside me kind of feels like there might be a Daniel Bryan sighting, or more likely a Ric Flair sighting.
Nature Boy. That would be amazing too.
Exactly.
That would be great.
He protests too much right now. Oh, I'll be in Chicago, but I haven't spoken to Tony. Hey, Tony, I'm here. So I'm just not sure whether I'm not sure if I would link him with Andrade. Andrade is not doing anything for me so far.
But he would raise the profile for sure.
Well, he would, but I personally feel that Ric Flair might be used better in a different capacity. I would personally link him up with Hangman Page. Flair basically getting the Eye of the Tiger back in Hangman.
So I'm going to throw this comment up from our buddy Chris De Petrillo. He just says, Chicago will be forgiving because it's Punk and it's his big return, but if he doesn't meet expectations with his in-ring and disappoints those who expect the Punk of old, will he lose his steam? That's a pretty interesting question, but I think he'll be given the benefit of the doubt, like Chris said, on day one. But I think he's just too smart. What do you think?
I agree with that. I think he's too smart to not be in shape for this. He has been training, and I believe that when you wrestle Darby Allen, you could probably be a prop and still have a really good match.
True.
So he has the perfect opponent for his debut, even if he's lost a step, even if he's a bit slower, even if he's a bit more belabored, which we don't know because he's in really good shape. I feel that Darby and Punk are going to tear the house down.
I would wonder. Now, Darby's been wrestling for a little while. He's got to have a little bit of the nervous butterflies going, don't you think?
Probably the biggest match he's ever had on the biggest stage ever. But I think one really cool thing about Darby is he's one of the few people who didn't get booed in Chicago or isn't going to get booed in Chicago while wrestling CM Punk.
Sure.
He's that big a star. I was expecting people to boo him out of the place when Punk had his debut, but that didn't happen. People chanted Darby, Darby, Darby just as much. So I completely see them on the same level. And it's this more than anything else shows how far AEW has come in the past 2 years. Nobody knew Darby Allen back at Double or Nothing 2020.
Yep.
Or 2019, I'm sorry. And now he's legitimately one of the biggest stars in the industry. Everything they've done with him, they've done perfectly.
All right, let's start talking about some of these matches here. The 21-woman casino battle royale for the shot at the AEW Women's World Championship. So I know there are like 13 names. I'll go through them quickly, and then there's like a bunch of women who are TBD. So one of the ones that you mentioned, Anna Jay, could be a part of this. But so far, and this is just a list that I got from Wikipedia. Even though people don't like Wikipedia for this reason, I find it to be pretty darn. When it comes to wrestling matches, I find it to be a pretty good reference. So Nyla Rose, Thunder Rosa, The Bunny, Big Swole, Julia Hart, Ty Conti, Diamante, Penelope Ford, Red Velvet, Sheeta, Emi Sakura, Jade Cargill, Kiera Hogan, and then, like I said, 8 women to be TBD. So there's some really women who are high on the list, like Thunder Rosa, Nyla Rose. And then there are women who are kind of like, who's next? Jade Cargill is one that stands out to me. For the purpose of what this match is for, which is for number 1 contender title shot, I don't think Jade's going to win. I think she's going to be the diesel person in this match, but I don't think she's ready for a title because you can't have her in the title scene without her winning, I don't think. And I don't think it's time for her yet. And maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But who do you see winning this match, and what are your expectations here?
Well, it's hard to say because there's so many people that are still going to be added to the match
Right.
until bell time. But of the field we know right now, I would say Thunder Rosa should be the favorite.
That one sounds right to me, too.
But only if they're actually going to go through with Thunder Rosa against Britt Baker. It may be that they're going to wait until next year with that match. So if that's the case, maybe of the people in the match right now, perhaps Ty Conti. I wouldn't go with Nyla Rose again because I think that program's been done and dusted.
Yes.
And nothing against Nyla, nothing against the matches they've had, but thanks, I'm done. Like, I want Britt Baker to face somebody else, and Thunder Rose would be my personal choice because I know they can have a great match together.
No,
and
I
think
agree.
that's the one.
I mean, they have already had a
Exactly.
really good match.
And that's, I think, the one thing Britt needs in her title reign is one career-defining match, and perhaps one that can top the last match they had together.
Yeah, that'd be a crazy match if they do top that match. Okay, so this one is near and dear to my heart because early on they were teasing Jon Moxley and Tanahashi, and that is a dream match for me. Tanahashi's maybe the greatest babyface of our time. Jon Moxley's been tremendous in his run in AEW, and they had to change gear. They had to change plans, or Tanahashi, maybe Tanahashi really wasn't the one. But I feel when you tease Tanahashi, whoever comes in after him, that's not Okada or that's not Suzuki or Naito, is just a giant step down. And this is nothing against Kojima because Kojima's awesome, but my anticipation when it was Tanahashi and Moxley was like at a 10, and now it's maybe at like a 6.5, 7. What do you feel about this one?
Well, I have to preface this by saying that I've known Kojima for over 20 years, and he used, when he was a young boy, or a young wrestler, he used to come to Germany to work for Otto Once at Peter William for CWA, and he was legendary for putting on about 50 pounds during his time here just by eating bread and other bakery items. Like, he's a fiend for bread. And the funniest thing about it is when he wrestled for Otto Once, he had a bakery as his main sponsor, but they didn't pay him in money. He could walk in at any time and get whatever item he wanted.
Awesome.
And he didn't want it any other way. So for very personal reasons, I love this match. I can't wait to see it. But my gut feeling is it's only going to be step one towards getting Jon Moxley to either Tanahashi or perhaps somebody else who's completely off our radar right now. And we do have to consider that Dynamite's going to be taking place in Cincinnati.
Yes.
So I feel that the next step's going to take place there.
Somebody told me that I should stick around and go to Cincinnati for Dynamite because it was going to be exciting. And I was like, I wish. If I didn't have a job, if I didn't have a family, I could totally go to Cincinnati. But unfortunately, that is not going to work for me. So yeah, heads up that that there might be something going on that show. So one of the people, and Dan reminded us, Ruby Soho, also possibly in the Casino Battle Royale for the women, the former Ruby Riot.
She's good. And there's people around But this happens basically before every show, saying that Tessa Blanchard's going to come in. So
That's
her name
probably a
gets mentioned
no.
a lot.
I think that one's a no.
I would have to strongly agree with that. I would say there's a bigger chance of bringing Sherry Martel back from the dead
Oh my God.
than Tessa Blanchard walking out of
God,
the
how
ring.
amazing! How amazing would a Sherry Martel in her prime be in AEW?
She would have been awesome. Like I've always been a huge fan of hers, both on a personal level and on a professional level. She would have been great in AEW. I mean, so many of the stars of that generation actually help the young wrestlers out in terms of how do you do promos, how do you present your character. Like they do so much, and I think she would take that ball and run far with it.
Yeah.
Basically, in the same way others are doing, other veteran women wrestlers are doing in AEW right now.
Okay, so next match on this list is Pac versus Andrade, and this is one of those matches that is probably a bit lost in the shuffle because the card is up and down, is has some really really good matches, and some of this I think they brought in Andrade, and I don't know, I mean anybody could argue what the right way to bring somebody in. He had a really, I guess, frustrating run in WWE that was probably not his fault. And to come in, he came in, I would say, with less heat than I expected. And that's because I'm a giant Andrade fan. It doesn't seem like the AEW fan base really took to him very well. And, they're trying to get him to cut promos. First, they put him with Vicky, which was definitely a mismatch from the beginning, in my opinion. Now they bring in Chavo. I think Chavo's great, but Chavo's also seen by this AEW fan base as like an old WWE guy who was pretty much slotted in the mid card for his entire run. And, I think that's taken some steam off of Andrade. Pac is a great wrestler. I imagine they're going to have a really good match. They probably are not going to have a ton of time just because the card is so loaded. But I'm really, really, really hoping, because to me, Andrade has gotten over everywhere he's been, except WWE, which, like I said, was probably more so not his fault. It was the company's fault. They just didn't see whatever. But I just have so much faith in him to get over, and I hope this match is one of the things that really helps him get over with this audience. Pac and Andrade, what do you think?
Well, they're setting him up for success by being able to face Pac in his first big pay-per-view match. I feel he really needs a breakout performance in this one because, as you said, the fans haven't really taken to him yet. I thought that when he walked out after Vicky Guerrero announced him, nobody reacted at all. That was not a good sign at all. And I agree that Chavo. There's another thing with Chavo. People want to like Chavo because he's a legend.
Yeah,
Mid card or not, he's a legend.
He's
legend.
a very memorable face from when a lot of these folks were watching wrestling.
He's great, but I feel that if the goal is to get Andrade booed, Chavo's not the right guy to be by his side. And that's the same reason why I don't think Ric Flair would work with him for that purpose, unless they go in a completely different direction. Which, I mean, we know that when something doesn't work, AEW pivots.
Yes.
But as far as the in-ring goes, this is going to be his big litmus test. If he can't have a good match with Pac, then maybe this is not the Andrade that we knew before WWE.
Yeah, that would be very bad, I think, if they don't have a barn burner here. Then there's going to be people, and I don't know. I'm not going to say I know what that locker room is like, but if he is one of those guys that we're talking about who is sort of brought in, and then there are people who are brought in who are a little bit higher on the pecking order than him, and he doesn't produce, he could be one of those guys who sort of slides down. And I don't want to see that happen because I love him, and I think he's got so much star quality potential. And look, with this Forbidden Door, there's a natural connection there as well with Naito and stuff like that. So that could be fun. Go ahead.
Well, there's a ton of people in AEW who could have really great matches with and great feuds with, and perhaps, I want to see him with guys like Rey Fenix, with Penta. I don't want to see them on the same side, but against one another, because I really feel that stylistically, those two would be his best opponents in the entire company. And another guy I would love to see with him is Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson.
Oh yeah, that would be great. That
Especially if they get 20 minutes, because those guys, I feel that I feel that Andrade is going to get over based on his in-ring work more than his personality, and he needs help in that regard right now. So I really hope that the match is going to deliver. I hope they get enough time, and I kind of share your views on it, perhaps being a little shorter than they might need to really get over, because it's a loaded show. There's so
yes,
many matches on that show.
yes. Yeah, I think we're at 10 unless something gets added. And Dave and I had Tony Khan on Wrestling Observer Radio last weekend, and I asked him, I was like, there's a lot of stuff on this show, but we still have the two go home shows. Like, is there anything else going to be added? And he didn't say match wise, but he did say, stay tuned because there might be a couple things that they add. So maybe there will be another match. Okay,
Maybe.
so let's talk about Paul White versus QT Marshall. This being, if you think about who Paul White is and how many times he should wrestle in a year, this is the right place for him to be in a match on All Out. He's, a very familiar face to wrestling fans, and I don't have a problem with that at all. The problem that I have is the QT Marshall piece of this, and this is not a shot at QT. It's more a shot at kind of the building of the QT character. They put him with, some interesting guys in his stable, but they're not necessarily pushed guys. They're kind of they're more of the jobber kind of group. And so you have Big Show, you have QT. I understand the pairing, and I just don't think QT's level has raised very high in his time so far. I think they've been trying to do this heel thing with him. I don't think it's worked very, very well. It's kind of, I guess it's okay for TV and especially the streaming stuff that they do. But in Paul White's first match back, I don't, unless this is setting up something else that might be bigger, I don't know if this is the right usage of him, I guess.
Well, I personally, I don't mind QT. I really love him on Sammy's vlog, for instance, and I'm probably more into the QT Marshall character than most people.
Okay, that's fair.
Basically, just because of his space flying tiger drop, which might be the ugliest version I've ever seen, but also one of the coolest versions, if you catch my drift. I don't mind this match at all, especially if it's going to be a buffer match, because
Yeah, and it'll be short.
I really hate it when it ends up being the women who kind of get the match after the big match,
Right.
and people kind of don't really react or just don't enjoy the match as much. I feel that if you put Paul White in there and put him over quickly, I'm talking about sub 2 minutes,
Yeah.
not a lot of selling. I think it's going to serve its purpose. It's gonna be a palate cleanser, so to speak. And I think I'd rather see QT Marshall get that treatment in terms of the big picture than anybody that they might have plans for. I mean, QT has wears many hats at AEW, and I'm not sure that in ring is ever going to be a major player. So I feel that he might be a good choice because it doesn't cut off a young guy's legs. If
Very
Camarada,
true.
for instance, did the
Very
match,
true.
Camarada has a lot of upside if they pull the trigger with him, and I would hate to see him get squashed by Paul White. If it's QT, really, what's the damage?
No, it's very true. You've been like you mentioned, 1982, 83 was kind of your foray into wrestling. So you've been watching wrestling a long time. You understand how it works. How would you book Paul White as this legendary character? We don't need to see him wrestle very much. He's doing the commentary on the streaming show. And Mark Henry is sort of similar in a similar role. Like, we don't need to see these guys wrestle, but it's kind of like a fun memory or a fun thought to go, oh, we loved these guys back in the day. It's kind of fun to see them once or twice a year. But how would you utilize those guys? Would it be just in that legendary status where they just get fed somebody who, is disrespectful to their broadcast partner, and then they go, okay, now we got to fight for that guy who can't fight for himself? Like, do you think that is the right way to use Paul, and then if Henry comes back too as well.
Well, the thing I would try to put together for Paul White is a match against Shaq.
Yeah,
That's the one I really want to see because it's been over a decade in the making, and Shaq has been in AEW before, so there's going to be an opportunity in the future. That's a match I could see for Paul White. I would try to keep his appearances, except for this one, to somewhat major matches. For instance, him being the equalizer when you have four guys who are going to have to face five guys from the elite, and they need an ass kicker. Maybe bring in Paul White just for this. You could have him team with Marco Stunt to have a big and small connection or something. I just wouldn't do that much with him in the ring. I feel that they have so much talent that it would not be prudent to focus too much on these legends.
yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. The only other thing I was thinking about for White is Darby and Sting. They have a match against some bad guys. The bad guys bring in an equal, someone to lean the scales for them. And then because of Sting's connection with Paul White from back in their WCW days, you bring him in, for that kind of TV match. I think stuff like that is fun. But like you said, you have to use him sparingly because his value in these moments decreases the more that he's on television, not the less that he's on television.
And see, that's why I think that the QT Marshall match is kind of a tune-up match for him to show people that he can still go and still be an ass kicker, because then he can build to something else. And I completely agree with everything you said about him. He needs to be in a special role. Like when you bring back Brock Lesnar, for instance. Like he shouldn't be a day-to-day thing. He perhaps shouldn't be in the same programs that he's already done 15, 20, 50 times.
Brock popped a SmackDown rating without even being on SmackDown.
Smartest man in the business. And he's not going to travel that far right now because he's always busy with other projects. So anything that's within an hour or two flight time from Los Angeles, good chance he might make it, but otherwise not going to happen.
Man, that guy. All right. So we've seen some pretty good TV stuff with the Five Labors of Jericho. Some people have thought that it was maybe a little less than they were expecting, but I actually, they've been trying to lengthen this storyline with Jericho and MJF. And in some instances, like, wrestling fans, we like it when it's sort of long and you tell different stories and it's connected in some way. But some people still didn't like what they were doing with the Five Labors of Jericho. I liked it. I thought it improved the program. It made me anticipate where the end of this thing was going, even more so than before it started. But some people disagreed, and I completely get that too. We saw Nick Gage come in. They were trying to be creative with certain things. We saw Juventud Guerrera come in. And now this is the payoff. At least I think it's the payoff because it's Jericho's AEW in-ring career to get one last shot at MJF. What have you thought about the whole storytelling pretty much from the beginning? Because if you've been watching AEW Dynamite from the beginning, you saw some relationship there, and now it's kind of, we're finally getting the payoff. Now I guess tonight is the 100th episode of Dynamite, which is nuts. But the long-term storyline, what do you think about that? And then your anticipation for this match?
Well, I'll say this much. Chris Jericho has always been somebody who's really smart when it comes to getting new people over. And it feels like he's built from day one to give Maxwell Jacob Friedman that kind of shine. Beating Jericho not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. It's who's ever done that before? Like in 3 high-profile matches. I loved the labors of Jericho, and I was lucky enough to fill in on Dynamite for 2 of them. I did the Hoovy match and the MJF match, and I felt it went exactly like it should have.
Mm-hmm.
MJF put Jericho through hell for several weeks in a row, and no, I did Hoovy, I did Wardlow and MJF, those 3.
Oh wow!
And Jericho got put through hell. I wasn't expecting him to win against arrested MJF under any circumstances, and now he's 0-3 against MJF. So I'm not sure if I would give him the win at the pay-per-view, to be honest, because what would it have accomplished then? If Jericho is the one left standing and he has the last laugh against MJF, where does it go from there?
Yep.
Is it maybe time for Jericho to actually hang up his boots? I mean, he's 50 now. It feels like he's aged 10 years in the past 2 years visually. And he's really pulled out all the stops for his last several matches. He's done moves he hasn't done in 15 years.
Yeah.
And each of those matches was interesting and memorable for different reasons. So it kind of feels like a going away party for Jericho, if that makes any sense.
If this was the one thing that kind of sticks out to me as to maybe why it won't be is just its position on the card, because it does feel like if it is fourth most interested, so let's look at him. We talked about Moxley and Kojima. It's probably, maybe a little bit higher than that match, but Bucks and Lucha Bros in the cage, I think people are more interested in that match. Kenny Omega and Christian Cage, I think I still think people are more interested in that match. And then Darby and CM Punk. So, at best, it's probably fourth from the top. And I feel like if you're going to do Jericho's retirement match, it should be a little bit closer to that top than fourth.
That's a very good point. So maybe, perhaps, there's a chance that a certain person whose name rhymes with Hammy might show up and kind of get his revenge on MJF and kind of splinter off into a different direction against MJF.
Sure.
And Jericho gets a day of execution. That's possible. He's still very valuable to AEW. That's the thing.
So let's talk about Jericho for a second, because his value to this company from the beginning was he was one of the really, really smart pieces for Tony Khan. He gave them credibility right away. For the people who didn't maybe know Kenny Omega or the Young Bucks that well, they probably knew Cody. Jericho was there. Jericho and Jim Ross really were there for those people. And then you get Moxley coming over, which further established that this is maybe a cool place to be. But Jericho, like you said, he is in the later years of his career, and maybe he does move a little bit more to that legendary status where, maybe he has one feud a year and he's not working consistently every week in and week out. The one thing, though, that dude still draws TV ratings. Like that would be the one thing, is if I'm looking at it going like, can I pull this guy out? Well, if you pull him out, you open up a spot for somebody else. You open up a main spot to plug in other guys and see who works. And so you can be creative in that way. But at the same time, you're taking out a surefire television rating draw. And, when Tony's looking at, redoing the deal in a year or two, the higher the ratings is going to be the better for that deal. So that's the part that I kind of wonder about when it comes to whether or not Jericho should, hang up the boots for any sort of amount of time.
And that's what makes the match compelling, because you really don't know how it's going to go. From a fan standpoint, my personal fan heart, I still want Jericho to wrestle Sting before he goes into retirement or semi-retirement, because that's the one. They've never been in the ring together.
No way.
Believe it or not, they've never shared the ring. And I brought that up on Twitter a couple weeks ago, and the first person to like that tweet was Chris Jericho. So you tell me if that's something he might be interested in doing.
Hey. Also, though, I said that, there's not that many sharks. Jericho is very smart about his business. So I imagine whatever happens to him, he's going to have quite a say in that.
Only if he transitions to the broadcast booth, please give him a Xanax before he goes on the air.
Well, I mean, he's even like, he was in the last Rampage. He was definitely listening to Twitter, because he said something about toning it down, and he's like, "No, this is just my voice," or he said something like that to let us know.
That's the way I talk.
Yeah, exactly. He's the guy. That's his persona as a commentator. That's what he thinks is the right for his role. So
he's Chris Jericho.
Yeah.
There's only one Chris Jericho. Let's be clear. I mean, tell me one person who has kept reinventing himself for that much time. Completely different roles in different promotions, and he always stayed near the top.
Yep.
So I'm not going to hate on that man. If you want to wrestle 50 more years, please go right ahead.
Yeah, he may not be able to do the lion salt at that point, but
He
yeah,
probably shouldn't at that point, but right now he can still pull it off. You remember when he botched it that 1 week because MJF was out of position,
yeah,
and the next week he did it again, and he did it perfectly, like the prettiest line salt I've seen since his days in WAR in
Oh wow,
Japan.
wrestling and romance.
Wrestling and Romance, which was a really interesting name for a promotion. I enjoyed their programming though.
Okay,
Big 10 room mark.
okay, so here's a match that is really interesting to me, a little bit under the radar. They just made it last week, and it's I think it was last week on Rampage. It is Miro and Eddie Kingston, and I think the reason why this is so interesting to me is because they are going to be in New York in a few weeks for that big Arthur Ashe show. Eddie Kingston, I'm sure, will be heavily featured on that show. Miro is maybe since the beginning of his original WWE run, maybe the hottest that he's ever been in his career. I think he's doing fantastic stuff. From the promos to the in-ring work. Maybe he's selling a little bit too much for some of these smaller guys, but hey, that's the game. I mean, I really enjoy him. So love Eddie Kingston. I think he's maybe the best underdog brawling babyface since Mankind and Cactus Jack to me, and I think he's got a lot of equity with that fan base. So this outcome is intriguing to me. Now, I don't imagine Eddie's going to win this match, but you also have to keep him strong because he is going to be the focus of some of that New York stuff. So what do you think about this one?
Well, I really hope it's a kickoff for a longer program. And
Yeah.
if it were my promotion, which it isn't, obviously, this would be the first time I do a double disqualification because they're beating each other over the head with everything that's not nailed down. I really wouldn't beat Miro right now. He's not quite where you could say that, okay, it's time. At the same time, I really don't think that Eddie should be beaten all that much because every big match he has, he loses.
Yep.
And he's kind of like Teflon. His appeal doesn't really get diminished by losing, but at some point, you kind of risk that people kind of lose faith in him. And when he was wrestling with Darby and Mox on his side or by his side, and he was the one whose name was being chanted, not Darby's, not Mox's.
Yeah.
That shows me that people are ready to support him going for a title and actually winning for a change. I just feel that there's a time and a place for it. The time is not Sunday. The place is not Chicago. So I really don't want him to beat Miro, but I would want him to beat Miro with every ounce of my body. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like I really don't want Miro to get beat, but I want Eddie with his mom in the front row to win that any title in New York, just for the memorable pop, just for that New York moment.
Oh yeah.
And there's tons of different things they can do. They might do the Bucks and Santana and Ortiz in New York.
Mm-hmm.
You could have that as a title change, for instance. But I feel that there needs to be something special.
Yes.
Something that everybody's going to remember for the first show at Arthur Ashe.
Yes.
You know, that kind of a WrestleMania moment at Arthur Ashe.
Sure. All right, there's lots of interest in here from the comments. I want to share a couple of comments here. Ryan Frederick agrees with us. Too soon to beat Miro. 100% agree. Chris says Miro wins by shenanigans, possibly. Lana.
That's great.
And we get a New York street fight in a few weeks. That would be very interesting.
That would be awesome. And then you can involve Eddie's mom taking Lana out or something.
That would be very cool.
Okay, this is probably too far. That's Vince Russo booking, but
yeah, exactly. And then Dan says Eddie's not winning here, but they keep this spinning, and Eddie wins a title in New York. Yeah, good. So Tim says a draw. I don't know if they have enough time to do a draw on this show, though.
Well, double DQ, double count out, anything works. But
they don't do any of that stuff. They don't do any DQs or countouts.
I know that's why it's more memorable when they do.
They could do it. I would be. I think the crowd would be fine with it.
I mean, we haven't really gotten those legendary promos back and forth between the two, so I feel that it would be too early to beat Eddie clean here.
Yeah.
So it's gotta go on.
Yeah, 100% agree. Okay, let's get to some of these title matches, and then we'll talk about CM Punk and Darby last. Young Bucks and Lucha Brothers, you already said, kind of what you were thinking about with this. It's going to be nuts. The Young Bucks, gosh, their heel work has been tremendous, and it has been rubbing a lot of people who I would say are in that, like, pro wrestling has to be one way. Like, those guys rub off so poorly on the like my partner John LaRocca. He comes from a specific booking mindset. He booked APW. Roland Alexander was one of his mentors. So he has a specific mentality when it comes to wrestling. And what they're doing with their heel work just piss him off to no end. But it's so good. They're so good at it. I think they've really upped their personality game. And I know that they've done characters like this before, but when you can then do it on TV, they've just become bigger stars in this heel run, I feel, and amazing work. And now you get the Lucha Brothers. I personally wanted to see Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus in this match because I wanted to see Jungle Boy get that win. It's not in the cards. They would have had to win this match if that was the cage match. And this is really, I think it was Tony. When we were talking to Tony Khan, he had mentioned him and Dave both mentioned that it's kind of a throwback to previous match because they did that ladder match. So now you get the cage match. There's a storyline there of previous matches between these two teams. So I'm fired up for it. I'm a little afraid because there could be some, hopefully not any accidents, but these guys are just going to go so hard. There's no way this is not a great match.
I agree. And maybe, just maybe, let me put an idea out there. What are the odds that the Young Bucks specifically do what they do to piss off John? I wouldn't put it past them. Like they do the same to piss off Cornette, so why not John?
Oh yeah.
And I'm not equating the two.
No.
I love John LaRocca.
No, John, he definitely has a specific mentality, and it's a focus on our show. Like we'll record tonight on the Fight Game podcast on the Wrestling Observer website, and this is maybe our biggest arguing point, which is what does pro wrestling have to be? And he is way more like pro wrestling has to be this thing in this canister, and I'm like, well, what we've learned over these last 2 or 3 years is maybe not. Like maybe that canister is a little bit bigger than we originally thought. So you can hear us go on the Observer website tonight, early tomorrow morning. I'm sure we will be talking about this match.
Well, here's the thing. If wrestling were something that you can put in a canister and that's all wrestling is, then AEW would not have as much success as they do.
No, not at all.
Because they're doing things that drive Jim Cornette up the walls. They're doing just things that drive John up the walls. And yet they've found more success than anybody really thought they would have.
Yes.
So they got to be doing something, right? Maybe there's an audience that isn't Jim and John and other people to a certain extent that don't want that kind of wrestling, that want a modern style, that want different ideas, new ideas. And I think that's just what wrestling does. It reinvents itself every couple of years. Just because WWE has been doing the same thing for 15 years now doesn't mean that's how wrestling should be.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't have to argue John's point, but he generally likes the show. He wants them to succeed. I think the term that he loves to use is the gaga. Like that's the stuff that drives him nuts because you can have some gaga. He thinks that AEW leans a little bit more towards the gaga than they need to, and I think that's probably what frustrates him more than anything else. But yeah, that's our conversation. This match is going to be fantastic. I'm 100% looking forward to it.
And see, that's specifically one of the things that I enjoy. I enjoy the gaga every now and then. Like it's a variety show. To me, personally, I want to see different styles, different people, different approaches. When you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 matches, the more different they are from each other,
sure,
the better. I mean, who wants to sit through 4 hours of watching the same match style over and over and over?
Here's an interesting one for me. Dr. Britt Baker, amazing character work. She has really turned herself into a player. On the wrestling side, I wouldn't say she's without the right opponent going to always have a good match. We saw the Thunder Rosa match, and that was excellent. Here with Chris Statlander, I'm not sure what to expect. Chris's character is it's dialed back a bit, I would say, from before when she got hurt before. She's still very beloved by the fan base, so I think it's the right title match here. If you are going to postpone the Thunder Rosa match, which is what it looks like they have done, and you're still going to build that one up, I don't think Chris is. I don't think she's at the level of Britt with the character work. But what do you think about the in ring here? Because I'm a little worried that it's going to be one of those matches that a certain part of the fan base is trying to will it to be this great match, and I'm going to sit there and go, it was okay, and everyone is saying that it was this fantastic match. A lot of times that can happen when you have these characters who the fan base just loves so much that they want to make the match maybe greater than it actually is. I'm rooting for both of them. I hope that they have a fantastic match, but I'm a little worried about whether or not it will reach that level.
Well, it's reasonable. I mean, Britt's matches since winning the title haven't been all that great, but I think with her is Britt does the best when she's wrestling a ring general.
Mm-hmm.
She needs somebody who's really, really good, and then she can shine. She may not be at the point where she can kind of camouflage other people's weaknesses. And that's why I think this match is going to be strong, because Chris Statlander is one hell of an athlete, and she has some very unique offense. The one concern I have is Chris is a lot bigger than Britt is,
Yes.
and Britt might have trouble maneuvering her around. And that's happened in the past with other wrestlers that Britt has faced. So I'm personally hoping for a really good match. I hope that both bring their A game, and I hope that the fans in Chicago appreciate what they bring. But I do feel that it might not be as strong as a Britt Baker Thunder Rosa rematch, for obvious reasons.
We'll see. You said Thunder Rosa maybe 2022. They do have another pay-per-view this year for Full Gear. Ruby would be, I think, a fantastic opponent for Britt if she is in AEW. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think they really need to build up that Thunder Rosa match. So maybe it's not immediate. But I would like to see another, what you said, a ring general in there, and maybe Ruby Soho could be that person for Britt next, if Britt keeps her belt, which I fully expect her to.
I think the biggest challenge with Britt is that she's so popular that it's going to be really hard to put her against baby faces.
Yeah,
because the dynamic is all wrong. Like when people keep cheering the heel, and you work a typical heel face match, the comeback is going to get booed. All the cheating in the heat spots is going to get cheered. That kind of makes for a weird dynamic.
Daza has an interesting one. He said a slow build for Jamie Hayter to challenge Britt wouldn't be the worst idea. I really like Jamie Hayter, by the way. When she came back, maybe not the best show to bring her back on because, of what that show was, the very first Rampage. But she, I think what impressed me even more than her being in the ring was that first promo that she did. I'm sure she memorized it. I'm sure she really, really prepared, but she knocked it out of the park with her first promo. Very calm, very confident, didn't skip a beat. And look, you have to promo with Britt Baker, which is, Britt's going to knock it out of the park. So you got to reach her level. I was very impressed with Jamie Hayter's promo. So I really like her addition to the team.
So what I found most memorable about that promo, and what I liked best, was that she didn't do the DMD afterwards. And Britt was like, she's gonna get there.
Yeah.
She should never get there. Jamie should never do the DMD.
Exactly.
She should be serious. She should be serious, and that might lead to where Britt kind of has enough of her eventually.
Yeah.
But I love Jamie Hayter. I was really happy that she's back. I wasn't expecting her to be back anytime soon. And she's kind of reinvented herself visually in the meantime. Like, she's really become much, much stronger. She really feels like a threat, like somebody you could credibly put against Jade, and she wouldn't look out of place.
Oh yeah. That'd be a nice match too. And she could probably, help Jade, because Jade is still very young in the business as well. Help her get through a longer match than she's had so far. Okay. last two matches here, the AEW World Championship, Kenny Omega and Christian Cage. I was of the opinion that their match on the very first Rampage was excellent. I thought it was the best Christian match that I could remember from a singles perspective. It was maybe more WWE style than I realized that they were going to do, but I also think it was Kenny Omega kind of playing to Christian's strength, and it made me think like, God, Kenny Omega would be great at WWE style. Not that I want him to go. Not that I want him to go there. But I expect, if I understand the way that Kenny thinks about this a little bit, is I don't know if he's into the detractors and he wants to prove people wrong. I think he's probably a little bit less competitive in that aspect than some athletes would be, but he also understands where he is in wrestling today. I know he's not thinking about retiring or anything, but I know that he feels his age at times because of the style and all the crazy matches that he's had. And this is an opportunity for him to have a really good match with maybe somebody that, it's not Okada, it's not Tanahashi, it's not these guys who you really expect him to, because those guys are so great. And Christian is an excellent wrestler. But I feel like this is Omega's opportunity to go, okay, doubters, like Christian and I are going to have this fantastic match. And you're not going to understand that I'm actually the one that's raising his game. He's not necessarily raising my game. I'm fully expecting them to blow the house down with this match. But I mean, there are people who are not really into this program. But after that Rampage match, I'm like, I'm in. I get it. I'm looking so forward to this match now.
Well, I kind of had a similar path on this because I was so into Kenny Omega against Hangman Adam Page. And when Hangman got taken out of the picture and Christian got inserted, I was like, no.
Yes.
I'm just gonna reject that on principle.
It was like Rey Mysterio coming out in the Royal Rumble when everyone wanted Daniel Bryan.
Pretty much. But here's the thing. I felt they really knocked it out of the park on the first Rampage show. I was not expecting a fairly short match to be that great. And as you said, it felt more like a Christian match than a Kenny Omega match. And that is not an insult, because Christian has always been one hell of a worker.
Yes.
One hell of a wrestler. And I hope that they're going to get 20, 25 minutes. And I believe that match on a technical level has the chance to steal the show. May not be the one with the most crowd reactions, may not be the craziest one, but in terms of bread and butter wrestling, I expect this to take the cake.
I'm there. I'm there with you on that. All right, the main event. Not we'll see if it's the main event, but I think the one that people have the most attention on, CM Punk and Darby Allin. We talked about this a little bit already. If I'm Darby Allin, I think, win or lose, this becomes such an important match for his career, for people who see him, because he's on a level right now where, you mentioned in the beginning of the show, nobody really knew who he was. And I feel like he's maybe the best booked babyface in the company, because he's an underdog, he sells, and then he wins. He doesn't take a lot of L's. He's he's got the comeback, all that stuff. People really love him for that. But for him to be a contender, or for him to be thought of in that world title program, he's got to level up a bit in the fan base's eyes. And this is his opportunity to do so. So while I fully expect CM Punk to win, the thing I'm going to be looking at most for this match is whether or not Darby comes out of this match as a current possible world champion contender, because I think that's the next level up for him in his rise in AEW.
Well, my personal feeling is that is exactly what's going to happen. He's going to look extremely strong, even if he loses, and he probably should be losing this match. I mean, just look at him. He got linked up with Sting, raised his level.
Yep.
They got linked up with Mox and Eddie, two of the most popular baby faces in the company. another raise. Now he's the person to welcome CM Punk back to wrestling after 7 years of being gone. Darby is a star now. He's going to be a superstar after that match. And I promise you, we're going to talk about Darby Allen against CM Punk in a couple of years, the same way we talk about the first match between Darby and Cody. Like a turning point in his career. There was a time before that, and there was a time after that. My personal opinion is Darby Allin is going to be one of the three biggest stars in AEW come the end of the year, and that is with all the additions that are coming in, because he's different. He appeals to an audience that a Kenny Omega doesn't necessarily appeal to, that a Jon Moxley doesn't necessarily appeal to. He's just so unique. And I think that is his biggest strength. And the other thing is, whatever Darby does, he throws himself into 150%.
Yeah.
His offense looks incredibly believable. When he darts out of that ring and does a dive, you can tell that he does it with bad intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sets him apart from almost everybody else. He is as real as it gets. Sorry, UFC.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a great weekend. How are you watching the show, by the way?
I'll be watching it live.
So what time would
TV.
What time would that be for you?
2 a.m.
Ooh.
Well, yeah, every show is basically in the middle of the night for us, but I haven't missed a single AEW pay-per-view yet. So
I
wish we could have been there in person.
Yes.
But right now you can
Double or Nothing, maybe?
I hope so. Like as a European, as a EU citizen, you can only get into the US right now with a national interest exemption. And I have a feeling that there may not be that much national interest to allow German commentators into the country to call a pay-per-view for the German audience. Catch my drift?
Yes.
So I'm hoping for Double or Nothing. That's what we're shooting for. But yeah, I'll be there. I'll be watching live every second of it, and probably not sleeping afterwards because I'm still so hyper. What about you? You're going to be there live.
I'll be there. Well, I'll be there. I'll be there
Lucky
with
bastard.
with the F4W crew. Myself and Denise Salcedo and Andrew Zarian will be doing a live episode of We're Live, Pal, which we're probably going to go through a lot of the same things that you and I talked about. Different kind of preview, I think. And we're trying to figure out if we can get Brian and Dave to join us, and crossing fingers. I think there's a good chance that we'll be able to get both of them, but we'll see. And then yeah, that whole weekend's going to be fun. I'm only going to Rampage, and I'm only going to Dynamite or All Out. I didn't want to busy my schedule with all these different wrestling shows that I need to to go to, because I just want to hang out with people who I haven't seen in 2 years, because we haven't done this, to where we're traveling to watch wrestling. The last show, I think, would have been Double or Nothing 2019. So that would have been the last time I traveled to see wrestling, I think. So
Same here.
So yeah, so lots of people who I haven't seen, I've kept up with them on Facebook, but kind of want to grab an adult beverage with them or have dinner with them and just kind of catch up with people. That's really what's, outside of the wrestling, like that's kind of my interest for this weekend. So
I'm kind of jealous, to be honest. Like I kind of went from being on the road for 250 days a year to being at home for 18 months. So
crazy.
I'm kind of jonesing to get back out there.
Yeah.
I was asked to go on the Jericho cruise in October, and that's one bridge I'm not going to cross at this point.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to subject myself to being on a Petri dish. Yeah, no. Like there's limits to my fandom, right?
No, 100%. So I just realized this, but Dan, also from Germany, he says he's going to be watching live as well.
Well, hi Dan and Tim. Very cool of you to come watch this stream. I wasn't expecting anybody from Germany to show up, but thanks for coming.
All right, so hey, Oliver and I have been doing this for the last two AEW pay-per-views, so we'll try and do it again the next time as long as schedules work out. But Oliver, I love talking with you about this stuff. You're so smart about it, and I think people who are watching this are like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about, man. But I think,
Don't go there.
okay. So a lot of the people who are watching this, they know you already, but I think that the people who may not know you, are like, man, this guy, he's coming with some stuff, with some information. But okay, so anything you wanted to plug before we get out of here?
Well, first of all, I appreciate being here. I always have a great time with you, whether it's in person or doing a podcast or something. Please do give John LaRocca my best. Please give everybody in Chicago my best. Wish I could be there. And well, if somebody's bored over the weekend and maybe wants to have CM Punk wrestle 20 different other AEW stars and see how he would do, there's a wrestling simulator out there called TNM.
There you go.
Which I kind of created many years ago. And you could do that right then and there. So that's my plug for the weekend. TNM7.com.
And that's where they find it?
That's where they find it.
All right. Hey, Oliver, thanks again. This was a blast. Again, love chatting with you. So for Oliver, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.